sleepy detectives, and welcome back. I know you're here to settle in and relax, so if you enjoy these stories, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I love knowing where our community is. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, let's get comfortable and jump straight into tonight's story. Tonight, we are taking a different kind of journey. We are traveling to a place of profound complexity, a nation where ancient tradition and sprawling high-tech modernity live side by side. A place of intense social order, deep honor, and shadows that are perhaps even more profound than the ones we're used to. Tonight, we are opening the case files of Japan. We all know the fictional archetypes of the forbidden. We know the sophisticated, intelligent connoisseur, a man of refined taste who is safely locked behind impenetrable glass, a boogeyman to be analyzed from a safe distance. We find this intellectual evil fascinating. But as we have learned so many times, sleepy detectives, the truth of what humans are capable of is so much more pathetic, so much more bureaucratic, and so much more disturbing than any fiction. The man we are about to meet was not a fictional supervillain. He was a small, giggling, and physically weak man. And his story is not about his capture. It is about his release. It is about the man who committed the unspeakable, and then, instead of being imprisoned, was given a microphone, a book deal, and a restaurant column. This is the story that defies all logic, the story of Issei Sagawa. So, get comfortable, settle in, let the world outside fade away. The first file is opening. Paris, June 11th, 1981. The afternoon is warm, the air soft with the scent of early summer. In the Bois de Boulogne, the sprawling, leafy park on the city's western edge, a man is walking his dog. It is a scene of perfect, unremarkable Parisian normalcy. But normalcy, as we know, is a fragile veneer. Near a small pond, half hidden in the weeds, the man notices something. Two heavy, dark-colored suitcases. They are new, and they have been abandoned. Curiosity, or perhaps a sense of civic duty, draws him closer. He nudges one with his foot. It is unexpectedly, unnaturally heavy. He unzips it. The image he confronts is not one of Parisian life. It is an image from a slaughterhouse. He recoils, stumbling back, his mind refusing to process the contents. He finds a park attendant who, in turn, and in a state of shock, calls the police. When the detectives from the Brigade Criminale arrive, they confirm the man's horror. The suitcases contain the separated remains of a young woman. The pieces are not random. They are butchered. One suitcase contains the torso. The other holds the head, hands, and feet. This is not a crime of passion. It is an act of cold, methodical disposal. But the person responsible, in their haste, has made a fatal error. A mistake born of arrogance, or perhaps simple exhaustion. Inside one of the suitcases, tucked amongst the horror, detectives find a receipt from a taxi service. It is dated just 2 days prior. The pickup location is not far away, 10 Rue Erlanger. The investigation, which could have been a search for a phantom, now has a laser focus. The police move quickly. They trace the taxi driver. He remembers the fare vividly. He remembers it because it was so strange. A small, frail-looking Japanese man. He had struggled to lift the 2 heavy suitcases into the trunk. He had seemed agitated, nervous. The driver had taken him to the Bois de Boulogne, where the man had insisted on being led out in a secluded area, dragging his heavy luggage into the woods. The investigation now has a name, an address, and a face. On June 13th, 2 days after the discovery, French police knock on the door of an apartment at 10 Rue Erlanger. The door opens.
Standing before them is the man the taxi driver described. He is tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with a high-pitched, almost childlike voice. He appears, in every conceivable way, harmless. His name is Issei Sagawa, a 32-year-old student from Japan, studying for a doctorate in literature at the prestigious Sorbonne.
When the police ask to enter, he does not resist. He does not deny. He smiles, politely, as if greeting an expected guest. "I'm sorry I didn't have time to dispose of the rest," he says, gesturing to his refrigerator. The seasoned detectives are unprepared for what they are about to see. The apartment is a house of horrors, a scene of profound, grotesque industry. In the oven, they find cooked portions of flesh. In the refrigerator, they find other parts, neatly packaged, as if from a butcher's shop. On his desk, they find a camera with rolls of undeveloped film. And they find a tape recorder. Sagawa, it seems, had been documenting his process. He is arrested, and at the station, he confesses immediately. He is not just cooperative, he is eager. He is calm, enthusiastic, and proud. He sees the detectives not as his accusers, but as his first captivated audience. He tells them everything. The name of the departed, Renee Hartvelt. She was a 25-year-old Dutch classmate, a bright, vibrant, multilingual student. He describes with a chilling academic precision the entire event. He explains that he was in love with her. He had invited her to his apartment for dinner and to read German poetry. As she sat at his table, her back to him, reading aloud, he retrieved a .22 caliber rifle. He raised it, aimed at the base of her neck, and committed the irreversible act. He then details the 2 days that followed, the 2 days he spent in the apartment with her, alone. He tells the police, with a disturbing connoisseur's pride, what he did next. He tells them of his ultimate transgression, the act that would make him infamous around the globe. He explains that he had a fantasy, a desire he had held for over a decade, and in that apartment he had finally fulfilled it. He had performed the forbidden taboo. He described his process to them, his initial disappointment when the act was done, his feeling of emptiness. He had even fainted. But when he awoke, his curiosity took over. He wanted to fulfill his fantasy. He began his study. He described in his audio diary the experience. He described the taste, the texture. He explained that his first attempt to bite into her flesh had failed, that it was too tough. He realized, as a practical matter, that he needed tools. He went to his kitchen and then to a hardware store. He returned and began the process of separation. He worked in his bathtub, a task that took him hours. He was, as he would later say, like a butcher. He documented it all. The photographs were a visual diary. The audio tapes were a running commentary, a review of his experience. He was not just a perpetrator, he was his own biographer. He explained to the baffled detectives why. This was not, he insisted, a base or savage act. It was, in his mind, the ultimate act of love. He was, he explained, in love with Renee. He was not in love with her mind or her spirit. He was in love with her health, her vitality, her beauty. And he believed, in a way that was to him perfectly rational, that by performing this ultimate consumption, he could absorb those qualities. He could assimilate her health, her beauty, into his own small, weak body. He was, in his own words, curing himself. The crime was confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. The motive was, in its own grotesque way, clear. The case was, for all intents and purposes, open and shut. But this, sleepy detectives, is not a story about a crime. It is a story about what happened after.
This is not a story about capture. It is a story about escape. To understand the monster, we must first understand the child. And to understand the child, we must understand the why. Issei Sagawa was born on April 26, 1949, in Kobe, Japan. He was not born into hardship. He was born into the opposite. He was born into a world of immense privilege, staggering wealth, and profound power. His father, Akira Sagawa, was a man of immense influence, the president of Kurita Water Industries, a titan of post-war Japanese industry. The Sagawa name carried weight. It meant success. It meant respect. It meant power. But from his very first moments, Issei Sagawa was a disappointment. He was born premature, a 1-kilogram baby. He was so small, so frail, that he was not expected to live. His father would later recall that Issei could fit in the palm of his hand. He was, as Issei himself would later describe it, a small, ugly baby. This smallness, this physical inadequacy, would become the single, defining, all-consuming obsession of his entire existence. He survived, but he never truly grew. He remained tiny, frail, and sickly. As he grew into boyhood, he was a stark, almost cruel contrast to the expectations of a nation that was rebuilding itself on the pillars of strength, industry, and masculine power. He was not strong. He was not powerful. He was, in his own words, a weak, ugly, and incompetent dwarf. His brother, Jun, was normal. He was healthy, he was athletic, he was, in every way, what Issei was not. The comparison was constant, and it was brutal. This profound, unshakable sense of his own physical inferiority created a chasm in his psyche. He was a member of the elite, entitled to everything, yet he felt like a lesser being. He was surrounded by beauty and strength, but he could not possess it. He was a prince, trapped in a pauper's body. This chasm, this void in his soul, began to fill with a dark, twisting envy. He did not just envy the strong and the beautiful, he resented them. He resented the world and the biology that had made him small. His family's wealth was not a comfort, it was an enabler. It insulated him. He was not just a weak boy. He was a weak boy who never had to learn resilience, who never had to face the world on its own terms. He was coddled, protected, and ultimately left to fester in the warm, humid greenhouse of his own developing perversions. He was a bright student. His mind was sharp, but his social skills were non-existent. He was awkward, high-pitched, and deeply unsettling to his peers. He had no friends. He existed in a world of one, a world of books, studies, and dark, burgeoning fantasies. He began to obsess. His obsession had a face. It was the face of the Western woman. In the 1960s, Japan was saturated with American and European culture. The image of the Occidental woman was everywhere, on film, in magazines, on billboards. They were tall, they were blonde, they were brunette. They were, to Sagawa's eyes, everything he was not. They were symbols of health, vitality, and a radiant beauty. He was not merely attracted to them, he was fixated on them. His desire, however, quickly diverged from simple teenage lust. He was not interested in a relationship. He was not interested in love, or even in a conventional encounter. His desire was not for connection, it was for possession. Absolute, total, and irreversible possession. He began to have dreams. In these dreams, he was not small, he was a giant, and he was consuming these beautiful women. He would later write about these fantasies with chilling clarity. He believed, he knew, that by eating the flesh of a beautiful, healthy Westerner, he could absorb her beauty, her strength, her vitality. He could, in essence, become her. This was not a fleeting dark thought. This was a goal. It was an ambition. It was the central organizing principle of his life. He rationalized it. He saw it as a form of ultimate aesthetic expression, a love so profound it required the complete assimilation of the beloved. My desire, he would later explain, was to keep her beauty all to myself. Eating her was, for me, the ultimate act of love. He was not, in his mind, a predator. He was a connoisseur. In 1972, in Tokyo, the fantasy demanded to be performed. He was 23 years old. He found his target, a German woman, a teacher. She was, to his eyes, perfect. He stalked her. One night, he followed her back to her apartment. He waited in the shadows. As she approached her door, he lunged from the darkness. But he had miscalculated. He had misjudged the difference between his fantasy and reality. The woman was, as he desired, strong. And she was terrified. She fought back. She screamed. His attack was a failure. It was clumsy, pathetic. He was, as he always feared, too small, too weak. He panics and flees into the night. He is terrified. He believes he will be caught. He confesses his strange desires to his father. He is expecting punishment. He is expecting condemnation. Instead, he receives the Sagawa family's signature solution. His father, Akira Sagawa, the powerful industrialist, does not see a predator. He sees a family embarrassment. He sees a scandal that must be managed. There is no police intervention. There is no deep, searching psychological inquiry. There is, instead, a transaction. Akira Sagawa decides that his son's problem is a nervous condition, and then he pays for the victim to be silent. The German woman is given a significant sum of money, and she disappears, taking the story of her assault with her. The charges are dropped. The incident is erased. This, sleepy detectives, is the most critical moment of Issei Sagawa's development. He has just learned two of the most dangerous lessons a human being can learn. First, he needs a weapon to overcome his physical weakness. Second, he is immune. His father's wealth and influence have not just protected him, they have given him a shield of invincibility. He is not subject to the same laws as other people. His actions have no real-world consequences. A scandal can be bought. A victim can be silenced. Justice is a commodity. This revelation is not a deterrent. It is a license. He is not shamed. He is emboldened. The failure of the attack is a temporary setback. The success of the cover-up is a permanent green light. He completes his studies in Japan. He is a man with a master's degree in English literature. He is also a man who knows, with cold certainty, what he must do next. He needs a new hunting ground, a place with a plentiful supply of his ideal, a place where he is anonymous, a place where his father's money can still pave the way. He sets his sights on Paris, the Sorbonne, the heart of the culture he fetishizes. He will go there to study, and he will go there to hunt. In 1977, Issei Sagawa arrives in Paris. He is 28 years old. He is, on the surface, the very model of a successful international Japanese scholar. He is funded by his father's immense wealth. He lives in a comfortable, modern apartment at 10 Rue Erlongue in the affluent 16th arrondissement. But this academic life is a meticulously constructed facade. He is not in Paris for literature. He is in Paris, as he saw it, for food. The city is, for him, a banquet. Everywhere he looks, he sees his ideal. French women, German women, Dutch women. They are, to his mind, glowing with health. His isolation is immediate and profound. He is a small,
awkward, Japanese man in a city of European giants. His French is poor, his social skills are non-existent, but now his isolation is a tool, his anonymity is a weapon. He is a ghost in the city of light. He spends his days in a state of feverish, voyeuristic excitement. He rides the metro, sits in parks, and wanders the university halls, not engaging with the world, but scanning it. He is a predator assessing a herd. His apartment on Rue Erlanger is his laboratory. He lives in a state of filth, his small rooms cluttered with books, papers, and the debris of a man who has no connection to the mundane world. And he is, once again, planning. He knows he cannot repeat the mistakes of Tokyo. He needs a weapon. He acquires a .22 caliber rifle, a hunting rifle, small, easily concealable, but lethal. It is the equalizer he has sought for so long. It is the tool that will bridge the gap between his weak body and his powerful, monstrous will. He uses his father's generous stipend for his auditions. He hires Western sex workers, bringing them back to his apartment. He is not interested in their services. He is interested in their flesh. He will ask them to undress. He will sit and stare at them. He will poke them, assessing the quality of their skin. He is, he would later explain, testing his appetite. He would sit with them, the loaded rifle hidden nearby, and he would fight the urge. He was practicing his self-control. The women are, understandably, terrified. They report this strange, disturbing dwarf. He becomes known. He is banned from the local brothels. He is too strange, too perverse. This rejection only deepens his resolve. He does not want a sullied product. He wants something pure. He wants someone from his own world, an educated woman, a healthy woman, a classmate. He begins his hunt at the Sorbonne. He is the strange Japanese student. He tries to ingratiate himself with his female classmates. He offers them money to tutor him in French. He invites them to his apartment for dinner. Most refuse. He is too intense. His eyes are too wide. His admiration feels less like a compliment and more like an appraisal. One woman, a Yugoslavian classmate, agrees to come to his apartment. She arrives and is immediately overcome by the state of the room, the filth, the smell, and Sagawa himself, who begins to behave erratically. She feels the danger. She makes an excuse and flees. He is frustrated, but not deterred. The script is solid. He just needs the right co-star. And then, in the spring of 1981, he finds her. Her name was Renee Hartfelt. It is crucial to say her name. It is crucial to remember who she was, because Issei Sagawa's fame would, in a final grotesque act, attempt to erase her, to reduce her to a mere ingredient in his own dark story. She was not an ingredient. She was a person. She was 25 years old. She was from the Netherlands. She was a bright, vibrant, and accomplished woman. She was multilingual. She was, like Sagawa, a student at the Sorbonne. She was, in a word, kind. And it was this kindness that would prove fatal. She knew Issei Sagawa from their classes. She saw what everyone else saw, a small, lonely, and profoundly awkward foreign student. But where others saw a creep, Renee saw a person. She felt sorry for him. Sagawa, for his part, was immediately fixated. He misinterpreted her kindness as a sign of interest. He began to orbit her. He was, in his own mind, courting her. He was in love with her, in the only way he understood the term. He wanted to possess her. He asked her to be his girlfriend. She refused, gently but firmly. She was not interested. This rejection, for a normal person, would be the end. For Sagawa, it was a complication. It meant his romantic script was a failure. So, he moved to his other script. If he could not possess her through love, he would possess her through consumption. He continued to be friends with her. He learned she was interested in German poetry. This was a perfect in. He learned that she, like many students, was not wealthy. This was another opening. He began to plan. He would invite her to his apartment. He would use the poetry as a lure. He would offer her a Japanese dinner. He would pay her for her time, a tutoring fee. The offer of money, combined with the academic lure of the poetry, was enough. Renee was hesitant, but she eventually agreed. She would come to his apartment on the evening of June 11th. The date was set. The rifle was loaded. The script was finalized. Renee Hartvelt, a woman of talent and kindness, walked toward 10 Rue Erlanger, completely unaware that she was walking into the final, horrific chapter of her life and the first chapter of Issei Sagawa's infamy. The case is, from a legal perspective, a slam dunk. Issei Sagawa is in custody. He has confessed in voluminous, proud detail. The evidence is overwhelming. The remains, the tools, the photographs, the audio tapes. The French justice system is under intense pressure to act. A team of France's top psychiatrists is assembled to evaluate him. The question is not if he did it. The question is why. The question is, was he sane when he did it? This, the question of sanity, will become the key that unlocks his cage. The psychiatrists, led by Dr. Jean-Charles Krombach, spend months with Sagawa. They listen, as the police did, to his life story. They listen to his fantasies. Sagawa is, once again, a perfect student. He is cooperative. He is articulate. He explains his perversion with intellectual clarity. The psychiatrists are baffled. He is not a typical killer. He is not a disorganized, raging psychopath. He is organized. He is intelligent. He is coherent. But his motive is, to them, fundamentally, clinically insane. His belief that he could absorb beauty by performing the forbidden act is not a rational motive. It is a delusion. His entire philosophy of the act is, in their expert opinion, the product of a profoundly sick mind. They are, in essence, charmed by his intelligence. They are swayed by the originality of his perversion. In their final report, they reach a stunning conclusion. Issei Sagawa, they declare, is suffering from a profound and incurable mental illness. He is, they conclude, in a state of madness and therefore unfit to stand trial. He cannot, under French law, be held criminally responsible for his actions. This decision, this single psychiatric finding, is the first catastrophic failure of the justice system. Sagawa is not a criminal to be punished. He is a patient to be treated. In 1983, a French judge, Jean-Louis Bruguière, formally accepts the psychiatric report. The charges against Issei Sagawa are dismissed. He is not found not guilty. He is not found guilty. He is, in the eyes of the law, a non-person, a madman whose actions, while horrific, have no legal meaning. He is ordered to be confined to a high-security mental institution in France for an indefinite period. The public is outraged. Renee Hartvelt's family is devastated. He has, in effect, gotten away with it. But for Sagawa, this is not a victory. It is a new prison. He is locked in the Paul Giraud asylum. And it is here that the second, more powerful player enters the game. News of the crime and his son's sentence reaches Akira Sagawa in Japan. For the powerful industrialist, this is not a personal tragedy. It is a business problem. It is the ultimate scandal, a stain on the family name, a threat to his reputation and his corporation.
And Akira Sagawa, as he proved in 1972, is a man who manages problems. He does not fly to Paris to comfort his son. He flies to Paris to control the situation. He arrives with a blank checkbook and a singular, relentless focus to bring his son home, to bury the scandal, and to erase the crime. He hires the best legal team money can buy. He does not, for a moment, believe his son is innocent. He knows what his son is. But guilt and punishment are for other people. They are not for the Sagawas. Akira Sagawa begins a quiet, devastatingly effective campaign. He is not fighting the crime. He is fighting the consequences. He agrees with the psychiatric assessment. His son is sick. He is not evil. He is a patient who needs help. He begins to put pressure on the French authorities. He uses his business connections. He hints at the diplomatic implications of holding a prominent Japanese citizen indefinitely. He also begins a media campaign in Japan. He portrays his son not as a monster, but as a victim of a strange mental illness, a victim of the decadent West, a victim of a foreign justice system. He is, in short, spinning the story. He is also, more practically, paying. He is showing the French government that he will take financial responsibility for the problem. For the French government, this is a perfect solution. It is a get-out-of-jail-free card, not for Sagawa, but for France. They can rid themselves of this embarrassing, horrifying case. They have an incurable patient who will be a drain on the state's resources forever. And here is this wealthy, powerful Japanese father offering to take him back. They agree. The decision is made. Issei Sagawa, the incurable patient, will be deported back to Japan. He will be transferred from a French asylum to a Japanese one. This is Akira Sagawa's first massive victory. He has saved his son from a French prison. But the French authorities, in their haste to wash their hands of Issei Sagawa, make the second and most catastrophic legal blunder of the entire case. On May 27, 1984, Issei Sagawa is put on a plane. He is heavily sedated, accompanied by French police. He is being deported. When he lands in Japan, he is immediately transferred to the Tokyo Metropolitan Matsuzawa Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility. The Japanese authorities have been assured by their French counterparts that this is a simple patient transfer. They have been told he is incurably insane and profoundly dangerous. The plan is simple. He will live out the rest of his days locked in a Japanese asylum. Akira Sagawa's plan, however, is far more complex. The moment his son is on Japanese soil, he begins the final phase of his operation. The Japanese psychiatrists at Matsuzawa begin their own evaluation of Issei Sagawa. They are, after all, legally obligated to do so, and what they find shocks them. The man they are evaluating is not a raving lunatic. He is not schizophrenic. He is not, in their expert opinion, insane in any way that would make him legally unfit to stand trial. He is, they conclude, sane. He is intelligent. He is coherent. He is fully aware of his actions. He is not suffering from delusions. He knows absolutely what he did to Renee Hartfelt. He simply does not believe it was wrong. Their diagnosis is personality disorder. He is a pervert. He is a sociopath. He is dangerous. But he is not, under Japanese law, insane. This is a stunning reversal. And it creates a legal paradox, a catch-22 of such profound, absurd proportions that it seems like fiction. The Japanese authorities now have a sane man who has committed a madman's crime. They decide, logically, to put him on trial. He is sane, he confessed, he must face justice. They contact the French authorities. They need the evidence. They need the police reports, the autopsy, the photographs, the confession. They need the file. And the French government, in a final, unbelievable act of bureaucratic pride, says no. The French charges, they explain, were dismissed. The case is closed. Under French law, a dismissed case file is sealed. It cannot be released, not even to a foreign government. Why? Because Sagawa was declared insane. To release the file would be a violation of his privacy as a patient. Furthermore, they argue, to try him in Japan would be double jeopardy. He was, in their eyes, judged as insane and sentenced to the asylum. The Japanese are stunned. They are holding a self-confessed, sane perpetrator, and they cannot prove he did anything. They have the man, they do not have the crime. Akira Sagawa's legal team, who likely anticipated this, pounces. They file a petition. Their client, Issei Sagawa, is sane. The Japanese doctors agree. He is being held in a mental hospital, but he is not mentally ill. He has not been charged with any crime in Japan. Therefore, his confinement is illegal. It is a violation of his basic human rights. The Japanese Ministry of Justice is trapped. They cannot hold him. They cannot try him. They have no choice. On August 12, 1986, after just 15 months in the Matsuzawa Hospital, Issei Sagawa is declared sane and not a danger to the public. The hospital, with no legal basis to hold him, signs his release papers. Issei Sagawa, 37 years old, puts on his street clothes. He is given a small bag with his belongings. He walks out of the front doors of the hospital. He is a free man. He has spent less than 5 years in confinement for one of the most brutal, premeditated, and well-documented transgressions in modern history. The Great Escape is complete. Akira Sagawa has won. He has used his wealth, his influence, and the bureaucratic incompetence of 2 major nations to achieve the impossible. He has laundered an irreversible act. He has, in effect, purchased his son's freedom. Renee Hartveldt's family, watching from the Netherlands, is plunged into a new, fresh hell. The man who ended their daughter's story, the man who performed the forbidden act, is now free to walk the streets, to eat in restaurants, to live a life. Their daughter is still gone. The world is, justifiably, outraged. How is this possible? But for Issei Sagawa, his release is not an ending. It is not a quiet, shameful retreat into obscurity. He is, after all, a performer. He is an artist. He has, in his mind, a story to tell. And now, finally, he has a public that is dying to hear it. His father, in saving him from prison, has done something far worse. He has unleashed him on the media. The perpetrator is free, and he is about to become a star. Issei Sagawa does not hide. He does not change his name. He does not move to a remote village. He does not live a life of quiet, anonymous shame. He does the exact opposite. He capitalizes. The Japanese public is not just horrified by Sagawa, they are fascinated. He is a real-life boogeyman, a monster from a fairy tale, living and walking in modern Tokyo. He is the ultimate dark celebrity. And the Japanese media, a notoriously aggressive and sensation-driven machine, is ready to give him the platform he has always craved. He is, in a word, marketable. The moment he is free, he is a sensation. He is, by his own admission, the most famous man in the world who has performed the forbidden act. He begins as a man of letters by writing. In 1989, he publishes his first book. It is not a confession in the traditional sense. It is not an apology. It is a detailed and celebratory account of his crime. He calls it In the Fog. In its pages, he describes everything.
the stalking, the act, the dismemberment, the taste. He writes of it not as a crime, but as a love story, an aesthetic act. The book is an immediate runaway bestseller. Japan is horrified and enthralled. The public reads it with a mixture of disgust and voyeuristic glee. They are, in effect, consuming his consumption. Issei Sagawa, the failed, small, ugly man, is suddenly a literary sensation. He is a published author. He is a man of ideas. The money starts to roll in. He is no longer just a pervert. He is a pundit. He is invited on talk shows. He sits on a stage under bright lights, a small, giggling, high-pitched man across from a shocked and fascinated host. And he tells his story again and again. He is a natural performer. He is charming in a deeply unsettling way. He is articulate. He is open about his perversion. He tells the audience with a smile, "Yes, I did it. It was a wonderful experience." The studio audience gasps. The ratings soar. He becomes a fixture, a Torrento, a Japanese media personality. He is not just a guest, he is a celebrity. He writes more books. He writes a restaurant column for a popular Japanese magazine, Shukan Gendai. The irony is grotesque. The man who committed the ultimate consumption is now a professional food critic. He reviews restaurants. He sits in fine dining establishments and he writes about the texture of the meat, the quality of the sauce, the ambiance of the room. He is, in effect, taunting the entire world. He is performing his perversion on a national stage, and he is being paid for it. His celebrity expands. He writes a manga, a comic book. He calls it Sagawa's I Want to Eat You story. It is a cartoon depiction of his crime, drawn in a lurid, graphic style. It, too, sells. He appears in films. He is cast in a minor role in a Japanese pink film, a softcore adult movie. He is cast, in effect, as himself, the celebrity pervert. He is photographed for magazines. He poses unclothed for a fetishistic photo book. There is no bottom. There is no line he will not cross, no act of self-exploitation too grotesque. And the Japanese media and public continues to eat it up. He has, in the most twisted way possible, achieved his life's goal. He is no longer small. He is no longer weak. He is famous. He has taken his ugliness and turned it into a commodity. He has taken his crime and turned it into a career. He has done what no other perpetrator in history has managed. He has monetized his monstrosity. What does a man who has done this and gotten away with it think about? In Issei Sagawa's case, we do not have to guess. He has told us endlessly. His celebrity was built on a foundation of absolute, shocking honesty. He is, first and foremost, completely, utterly, and profoundly without remorse. Remorse? He would say, giggling to an interviewer. What is there to be sorry about? I was in love. It was a beautiful act. He does not see Renee Hartvelt as a victim. He sees her as an angel, a goddess, who allowed him to fulfill his destiny. He speaks of her with a chilling, proprietary affection. He loved her so much he had to perform the act. He is, in his own mind, the real victim. He is the victim of his uncontrollable desires. He is the victim of his small, ugly body. He is a prisoner of his own perversion. I am not a bad person, he would insist. I just have this condition. He speaks of his preference not as a crime, but as a hobby. He compares it to people who like a certain kind of food. Westerners, he once explained, find it shocking. But in Japan, we have a long history of
Aesthetics. My act was an aesthetic one. He is a master of the rationalization. He has an army of intellectual justifications for his act. But beneath the intellectual babble, there is a simple, chilling truth. He enjoyed it, and he wants to do it again. Does the desire go away? An interviewer asks him. Oh no, Sagawa replies, his eyes lighting up. No, the desire is always there. When I see a beautiful woman on the street, in the supermarket, I am always thinking, she looks delicious. He confesses freely that he still has his fantasies. He writes about them. He dreams about them. The only thing stopping him, he claims, is his fame. I am too famous to act again, he laments. Everyone knows my face. If a woman disappeared, I would be the first suspect. It is very inconvenient. This is perhaps his most terrifying admission. He is not cured. He is not rehabilitated. He has not learned his lesson. He is simply inconvenienced. His fame, the very thing his crime gave him, is now the only thing preventing him from committing it again. He has, in effect, been cured, not by psychiatry, but by celebrity. He is also, fundamentally, a narcissist. He loves the attention. He sees his interviews not as confessions, but as performances. He is the star of his own dark opera. He is, in his own words, Sagawa, the man who performed the act. It is not a legal description. It is a job title. He is a man who looked into the abyss and saw a business opportunity. He is a man who committed an act of pure, irredeemable transgression and then convinced the world to pay him to talk about it. The world, outside of Japan's surreal media bubble, is not fascinated. It is disgusted. Renee Hartveldt's family must watch, from their home in the Netherlands, as the man who ended their daughter's life becomes a talk show curiosity. They watch as he writes books about the taste. They watch as he draws cartoons of his crime. They watch as he reviews restaurants. It is, for them, a second and perhaps even more painful violation. The justice system failed them, and now the media is celebrating their daughter's perpetrator. The international community is united in its condemnation. France, of course, is horrified. They, more than anyone, responsible for his freedom, and now they must watch as he thumbs his nose at them. They officially ban him from ever returning to France. But in Japan, he remains a curiosity. Why? Why was Japan so willing to accept him? The answer is complex. Part of it is a cultural quirk. The Japanese media has a high tolerance for the bizarre, the perverse, the freakish. Sagawa was the ultimate freak. Part of it was a sense of othering. He committed his crime elsewhere. He ended the life of a foreigner. He was, in a strange way, France's problem, not theirs. And part of it, the darkest part, was a form of cultural shame. Sagawa was the product of a good Japanese family. He was one of them. The media's fascination was, perhaps, a way of processing their own horror, a way of trying to understand how one of us could do that. But for Issei Sagawa, the fame he enjoys in Japan is a gilded cage. He is rich, he is famous, but he is a prisoner of his own reputation. He cannot travel, he is a pariah. And as the years go by, the fame begins to fade. The 1990s turn into the 2000s. The shock wears off. The media finds new freaks, new sensations. Sagawa is no longer new. He is no longer shocking. He is, in a word, boring. The talk show invitations stop. The book deals dry up. The magazine columns are canceled. He is, once again, just a small, strange, ugly man. But now he is an old, small, strange, ugly man. The man who ate his fill of fame is now being, in his own way, digested by the one thing he cannot control: time. The new millennium is not kind to Issei Sagawa. His father, Akira, the man who had bought his freedom, the architect of his great escape, passes away in 1993. With his father's passing, the two things that had protected Sagawa for his entire life, money and influence, begin to disappear. His mother and brother, deeply ashamed of him, want nothing to do with him. They do not want the celebrity perpetrator at the family funeral. He is, for them, an unperson. His inheritance is cut off. The flow of easy money stops. Sagawa, the gourmet, the man of letters, is now forced to do something he has never done in his entire life: work. But what work is there for a man whose only skill is being famous for the forbidden act? He sinks. He moves from his comfortable apartment to a small, squalid, one-room flat in a rundown section of Tokyo. The celebrity is now a pauper. He tries desperately to remain relevant. He gives interviews to any small tabloid newspaper that will pay him. He appears in obscure, low-budget documentaries. He is no longer a star. He is a sideshow. He is a pathetic, giggling, and increasingly decrepit old man telling the same tired, horrible story for a few thousand yen. He is, in effect, being punished, not by the law, but by the market. The public's appetite for him is gone. He is once again, as he was in the beginning, small, weak, and irrelevant. In 2013, Sagawa suffers a stroke. It is a cruel and perhaps fitting piece of irony. The man who had obsessed over health and vitality, the man who had tried to absorb it, is now a prisoner of his own failing body. He is left partially paralyzed. He is confined to a wheelchair. He is, for the first time, truly weak. He is dependent on home care nurses, on social services. The man who had once been a predator is now, in his own small, squalid apartment, prey. He is vulnerable. He is helpless. He is, in short, everything he has ever feared. He lives out his final years in this state, a small, paralyzed old man in a small, messy room surrounded by the ghosts of his past. He is, by all accounts, still unrepentant. In one of his final interviews from his wheelchair, he is asked once again if he feels remorse. He struggles to speak. His famous, high-pitched giggle is now a wet, rasping sound. "I just wanted to perform the act," he says. The desire, it seems, never left. It was just trapped, finally, in a vessel that could no longer act on it. On November 24th, 2022, Issei Sagawa's story ends. He is 73 years old. The cause of his passing is pneumonia. A quiet, mundane, and perfectly normal end for a man whose life was anything but. He does not pass in a prison, not in an asylum, but in his own home, a free man. The case of Issei Sagawa is, and always will be, a story about the forbidden. That is its hook. That is its horror. But the true horror of the story is not the act, it is the aftermath. The true horror is not what Sagawa did to Renee Hartfelt, it is what the world did in response. This is a story of a catastrophic, systemic failure. It is the failure of the Sagawa family, who, when confronted with a problem son, chose to manage him, not help him, who chose to buy silence rather than seek justice. It is the failure of the French legal system, a system so blinded by its own intellectual understanding of madness that it allowed an intelligent, sane, and calculating man to slip through its fingers, A system so prideful, so bureaucratic, that it chose to seal a file rather than admit a mistake. It is the failure of the Japanese legal system, a system so rigid, so bound by its own rules, that it was legally forced to set a confessed, sane perpetrator free. And finally, it is the failure of the media, a system so addicted to sensation, so driven by ratings, that it saw a monster and decided to give him a microphone.
A system that chose, with its eyes wide open, to turn a brutal, sadistic man into a celebrity. Issei Sagawa did not get away with his transgression. He was let away. He was aided at every single step by the very systems that were supposed to stop him. Renee Hartvelt was not just a victim of Issei Sagawa. She was a victim of his father's money. She was a victim of France's legal pride. She was a victim of Japan's bureaucratic incompetence. And she was a victim of our own dark, voyeuristic, and insatiable curiosity. The case of Issei Sagawa is a mirror. It forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. Who, in the end, is the real monster? The small, strange, giggling man who performed the forbidden act? Or the civilized world that for 40 years paid to watch him? Let's take a deep breath, detectives. Our first case, Issei Sagawa, was an exploration of systemic failure, a place where wealth and bureaucratic loopholes allowed a monster a spotlight. It was a societal horror. Now, we must prepare for something different, something more intimate, more claustrophobic, and, in many ways, unimaginably darker. We are leaving the courtrooms and the television studios. We are going inside a single, unremarkable apartment in Kitakyushu, and we are locking the door. In popular culture, we've become fascinated by a particular kind of villain, the moralist. The evil genius, like the Jigsaw character from the Saw franchise, who creates elaborate, cruel, mechanical traps. He puts his subjects into terrible games to test their will to live. It's a frightening fiction, but it has a comfort. The horror is external. It comes from steel, from gears, from devices. As always, the truth is so much worse. Tonight, we investigate a man who needed no steel traps, no gears. He was a real-life Jigsaw. But he didn't build machines. He turned people into them. He turned families into his traps. This is the story of Futoshi Matsunaga and his tiny kingdom, where psychological pain was the weapon and where the victims were forced to become the tormentors. Settle in. Our second file is opening. Futoshi Matsunaga was not born a monster. He was, by all accounts, born a charmer. From a young age in Fukuoka Prefecture, he possessed an almost supernatural gift. He had a charisma that radiated, a smooth, confident way of speaking that could disarm and delight. He was handsome, well-dressed, and he understood instinctively what people wanted to hear. He made them feel seen. He made them feel special. He was a salesman. And the product he sold his entire life was himself. His early life was a series of failed businesses and petty deceptions. He ran a betting company, selling futons. He would use his charm to secure deals, but he was a terrible businessman. He was greedy, impulsive, and always looking for the shortcut. His companies would inevitably collapse under the weight of his own fraud, leaving investors and partners ruined. He would charm a woman, marry her, start a family, and then, bored and in debt, he would abandon them, moving to a new town to start the cycle over. He was a shark, always moving, always consuming, leaving a trail of financial and emotional wreckage in his wake. But these were small-time cons. He was just a deceiver, a bad man. He had not yet discovered his true dark calling. He had not yet realized that his real talent was not just in charming people, but in breaking them.
That discovery would come in 1982, and it would come in the form of a young woman named Junko Ogata. Junko was, in many ways, his perfect opposite. She was from a wealthy, respected, and very traditional family in Kitakyushu. Her family was old money, stable, and deeply embedded in the community. Junko herself was shy, intelligent, and dutiful. And she was, to Matsunaga, a prize. She was not just a person, she was a gateway. A gateway to her family's wealth, and a blank canvas for his burgeoning, twisted art. He met her. He turned the full force of his charisma upon her. He was, to her, intoxicating. He was everything her quiet, traditional life was not. He was exciting, worldly, dangerous. She fell for him, completely. Her family, of course, was horrified. They saw him for exactly what he was, a manipulative fraud, a married man, which he was at the time, and a danger to their daughter. They forbade the relationship. They threatened to disown her. This was the first critical mistake they made. They tried to use force. Matsunaga saw this. He didn't fight them. He used their opposition as his primary tool. He didn't isolate Junko. He convinced Junko that her family was isolating them. He was the romantic hero. They were the oppressors. He began his first great experiment in psychological control. He convinced Junko to leave her family, to defy them, to move in with him. She, torn between her old life and this new, exciting love, chose him. She had just stepped into the trap. The moment he had her, the moment she was cut off from her support system, the charming mask of Futoshi Matsunaga dissolved. The romantic hero was replaced by the tyrant. His love became a torrent of control and profound mistreatment. He controlled what she ate, what she wore, who she spoke to, which was no one. He subjected her to brutal physical discipline for the smallest infractions. He would fine her for disobedience, plunging her into a debt that he controlled. She was no longer his girlfriend. She was his possession. But this was not enough. Breaking her was easy. His real target was the family that had defied him, her family, the Ogatas. Over the next few years, he waged a campaign of pure psychological warfare against them. He would use Junko as his weapon. He would force her to call them, begging for money, telling them she was in trouble. He would use her as a hostage to extort funds. He orchestrated a complex, long-term con. He convinced Junko's mother and sister that he was the victim, that Junko was unstable, that he was the only one who could manage her. He inserted himself into their lives, into their finances. He then escalated. He began to accuse the Ogata family of betraying him. He fabricated stories. He created a reality where they owed him. In 17 years, from 1982 to 1997, he systematically, methodically, and relentlessly destroyed the entire Ogata family. He conned them out of their life savings. He turned them against each other. He subjected them to the same psychological and physical distress he had perfected on Junko. He held them all captive, not in an apartment, but in a prison of fear and shame. When Junko's father, Takashige, began to suspect the full extent of the con, Matsunaga sensed a threat to his control. He didn't act himself. That was not his way. He ordered Junko and her mother to handle the problem. Through a campaign of profound distress and manipulation that he directed, Junko's father was driven to a final, tragic choice. He took his own life. Matsunaga, seeing this, had a revelation. He could get other people to do the ultimate transgression for him. He then turned his attention to Junko's mother. He confined her. He tormented her. He, along with a now broken Junko, subjected her to such profound suffering that her health failed, and she too passed away. He had won. He had utterly destroyed the family that had crossed him. He had taken their money, their dignity, and their lives. And he had, in the process, created his perfect accomplice. Junko Ogata was no longer a person. She was a tool. She was a hollowed-out vessel, her morality erased, her will replaced by his. She was completely, totally, and irreversibly his. This was the blueprint. This was the art he had perfected. He was now ready to move on from his masterpiece on the Ogata family. He was ready to take his show on the road.
He was ready for the Teraya family. In 1994, while still in the endgame of his destruction of the Ogata family, Futoshi Matsunaga was looking for new streams of revenue. He met a man named Kazuya Teraya. Mr. Teraya was, in many ways, an easy mark. He was a businessman, but he was known to be a soft touch. He was kind, perhaps a bit naive, and he was, like so many, captivated by Matsunaga's intense charisma. Matsunaga didn't present a con, he presented a friendship. He learned about Mr. Teraya. He learned about his family, his wife, Toki, and their young daughter, a bright, happy 10-year-old girl named Aya. Matsunaga became a family friend. He was a regular guest. He was charming. He brought gifts. Then he presented the business opportunity. It was a vague, exciting, can't-miss deal. Mr. Teraya, trusting his friend, invested. The hook was set. Almost immediately, the deal went sour. Matsunaga, the picture of concern, came to Mr. Teraya with terrible news. There were complications. There were angry partners, who were, of course, entirely fictional. He was, in short, replicating the scam he had run a dozen times. But this time, he had a new, darker purpose. He didn't just want Mr. Teraya's money. He wanted his family. He wanted a new kingdom. He needed a castle. In 1996, he found it. An unremarkable, drab apartment in Kitakyushu. He convinced, or rather coerced, Mr. Teraya and his family to move in. Why would they do this? Why would an entire family abandon their home to move in with a business partner? This, sleepy detectives, is the genius of Matsunaga's method. He didn't use force, he used fear. He presented them with a new, terrifying, and completely fabricated reality. He told them that Mr. Teraya was now implicated in a serious transgression, that his angry partners were gone, that the police were involved. He convinced the Teraya family that they were fugitives. He was, he claimed, the only one who could protect them. He was hiding them. Their home was no longer safe. They had to come with him now to a place where no one could find them. The Teraya family, terrified, confused, and believing their lives were in danger, packed a few bags and followed their savior into the trap. The door to the apartment in Kitakyushu closed. It would not open again for them. The apartment was not a home. It was a laboratory. It was here that Matsunaga, aided by his loyal, broken accomplice Junko Ogata, would perfect his art of psychological destruction. The Teraya family was not the only set of subjects. Matsunaga, through similar cons, had lured others. Another man, and a woman named Kumiko, along with her young daughter. The apartment was now a crowded, cramped, and terrified commune, a tiny, soundproofed kingdom, and Futoshi Matsunaga was its absolute, undisputed god. The moment they were isolated, the friend and savior vanished, replaced by the tyrant. His control was absolute. It began with simple, dehumanizing rules. Rule 1. Control of information. No one was allowed to leave. No one was allowed to contact the outside world. The windows were covered. He and only he was the source of all information. He would leave the apartment only to return with terrible news about the non-existent police manhunt. The fugitives, he'd say, were now prime suspects. Their faces were on the news. He was their only lifeline. To leave the apartment was to be arrested. To defy him was to be exposed. Rule 2. Control of the body. He instituted a system of privileges. He controlled the food. No one ate unless he allowed it. Food was not for sustenance, it was a reward. Disobedience meant starvation. He controlled sleep. He would wake the inhabitants at all hours for interrogations or drills. Sleep deprivation is the fastest way to break the human mind. It erodes logic, reason, and the will to resist. He controlled bodily functions. No one was allowed to use the bathroom without his explicit permission. This was not just control, it was profound, calculated humiliation. He was reducing his adult subjects to the level of terrified infants. Rule 3. Control of the psyche. He created a new economy. He assigned everyone ranks. He would promote one victim and demote another. He turned them against each other, forcing them to compete for his favor. He instituted a system of fines. Every infraction, a sigh, a disrespectful look, a moment of laziness, came with a heavy monetary fine. He was, on paper, plunging them into a debt they could never repay, reinforcing his legal control over them. This was the game. He was the jigsaw, and his subjects were trapped. But his traps were not mechanical, they were psychological. This continued for months. The subjects became emaciated, weak, and utterly disoriented. Their identities were being systematically erased. But as with all tyrants, this level of control was not enough. He didn't just want obedience, he wanted participation. He needed to escalate. The electricity game was his next great, terrible invention. It was, in his mind, the perfect tool. It was easily controllable, it was terrifying, and it was the ultimate expression of his power. He had a small handheld electrical device. He would sentence a victim to a shock. But here is the central, sickening genius of Futoshi Matsunaga, the detail that separates him from every other perpetrator. He almost never did it himself. That was messy. That was work. He was the director. He assigned the role of enforcer. He would look at Mr. Toraya. "Toki, your wife. She looked at me the wrong way. That is a serious infraction. You will administer the punishment." He would hand the device to the husband. What, sleepy detectives, do you do in that moment? You are starved. You are sleep deprived. Your mind is broken. Your entire reality is this one foul room. This God who controls your every breath has given you a choice. A choice? No, not a choice. An order. If you refuse, you become the new target. Your infraction will be worse. Your punishment will be doubled. And then he will simply hand the device to your wife and order her to punish you. This is the game. It is unwinnable. So, with tears streaming down his face, his soul shattering, Mr. Toraya would take the device, and he would deliver the shock to his own wife. And Matsunaga would watch. This was his pleasure. This was his art. He was not just breaking their bodies, he was eviscerating their souls. He was proving that any love, any loyalty, any family bond could be dissolved by his will. He made fathers harm their daughters. He made mothers harm their sons. He made them all harm each other.
He sat on the sofa, a calm, detached spectator, a director watching his play as his subjects, his creations, did his bidding. In the Saw movies, the victims are given a chance. Live or perish. Make your choice. The horror is that they must harm themselves to survive. The reality of Futoshi Matsunaga was so much worse. His game was, you will survive, but to do so, you must harm everyone you love. This went on for years. The apartment in Kitakyushu became a sealed-off, private hell, a place existing outside of time, outside of reality, outside of human decency. The subjects were no longer people. They were just things, raw material for his will. Inevitably, the human body cannot withstand this level of sustained torment. In 1996, Mr. Kazuya Toraya, the first man he had lured, the friend he had betrayed, succumbed. After months of starvation, electrical shocks, and profound psychological agony, his body simply gave out. His life ended in that apartment. For any normal perpetrator, this is a crisis, a body, a problem, a witness. For Futoshi Matsunaga, this was an opportunity. He gathered the remaining, terrified inhabitants. He looked at the vessel of Mr. Toraya. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He looked at Toki, the man's wife, and at Aya, the man's daughter, and he gave his next order. He's gone. You let him get away. This is your fault. Now you will dispose of him. He handed them a kitchen knife, a pot. He forced the mother and the daughter to take their husband and father's remains into the bathroom. He ordered them to perform the final, unthinkable act of desecration. He sat just outside the bathroom door, listening, giving instructions, as a wife and child were forced to dismember the person they loved. He ordered them to boil the flesh, to separate the bones, to crush the evidence into small, disposable pieces. He then had them package the pieces, and over the next few days, he escorted them on trips to dispose of the small packages in the ocean and in various garbage bins around the city. This, detectives, is the ultimate horror of Futoshi Matsunaga. Jigsaw built traps to see if people were worthy of life. Matsunaga built a trap to prove that life was unworthy. He had done it. He had created a system where he was completely, totally insulated from his own transgressions. He had not laid a hand on Mr. Toraya in the final act. He had not touched the remains. He had not disposed of the evidence. They had. He was, as he would later claim, just a spectator. He repeated this process. The woman, Kumiko, also succumbed to the torment, and again, he forced her daughter to do the same. In total, at least 7 people vanished inside that apartment. 7 lives ended and then erased by the hands of their own terrified, broken loved ones. And Matsunaga just watched. His kingdom was perfect. His system was flawless. He was a god in his own foul, 2-bedroom universe. He would have, perhaps, continued this indefinitely, but he made one simple, fatal miscalculation. He underestimated the will of a child. Her name was Aya. She was the daughter of Kazuya and Toki Toraya. She was 10 years old when she entered that apartment. She grew up in that hell. She watched her father perish. She was forced to participate in his erasure. She was herself a subject of Matsunaga's games and disciplines. But unlike the adults, her mind had perhaps not been fully formed. It had not been broken. It had been forged in the fire. In 2002, she was 17 years old. After 7 years of captivity, she saw a moment, an opportunity. Matsunaga's control, after so many years, had become lax.
He had become arrogant. He was a god, and gods do not expect their creations to defy them. In a moment of distraction, Aya, now a teenager, simply ran. She unlocked the door, ran out of the apartment, and did not stop. She ran until she found a police station. She was emaciated. She was covered in burns and bruises. She was in a state of profound shock, and she told them a story. She told them about the apartment, about Matsunaga, about Junko, about the electricity game. And she told them about her parents and the other victims. The police, at first, could not comprehend it. The story was too monstrous. It was too fictional. It was the rambling of a deeply disturbed, traumatized girl. But her physical state, the burns, the malnutrition, that was real. They investigated. They went to the apartment, and they found Futoshi Matsunaga and Junko Ogata. They were, just as Aya had described, living there. The puppet master's spell was, in an instant, broken. The moment the outside world, the real world, flooded into his tiny kingdom, he was just a man. A surprised, angry, and suddenly very small man. The trial was a sensation. It was a circus of horror. Matsunaga, the master manipulator, tried to play his final game. He tried to play it on the court. He pleaded not guilty. His defense was one of pure, unadulterated arrogance. He claimed he had done nothing. He was just a spectator. He had witnessed these things, yes. He had witnessed these families, in their own dysfunction, turn on each other. He had just watched. It was, he claimed, Toki and Aya who had ended Mr. Toraya's life. It was Junko and her mother who had caused her father's passing. He was, he argued, innocent. He was gaslighting the entire Japanese justice system. It did not work. The testimony of the survivors, of Aya, and, most critically, of Junko Ogata, sealed his fate. Junko, once she was finally physically separated from Matsunaga, began the long, slow, agonizing process of becoming a person again. Her testimony, the testimony of the puppet who had finally cut her own strings, was devastating. She laid bare the entire system, the control, the manipulation, the orders. She was a perpetrator, yes, but she was also his first and most profoundly damaged victim. The court, after listening to months of testimony that pushed the boundaries of human comprehension, delivered its verdict. Junko Ogata, for her role, was given a life sentence, and Futoshi Matsunaga, the puppet master, the director, the spectator, was sentenced to the end. He remains on that row today. His appeals have all failed. He is, finally, a man trapped in a box he cannot talk his way out of. He is the real Jigsaw, a man who proved that the most terrifying traps are not made of metal. They are made of us. He proved that all it takes to turn a father, a mother, a lover into a weapon is the right words, applied with the right pressure, in a room with no way out. His case is a chilling, horrifying reminder. The horror of Saw is that a machine might test your will to live. The horror of Futoshi Matsunaga is that a person can, with enough time and enough pain, force you to take that will from someone else. The file on Futoshi Matsunaga is closed, but the questions it opens, they will haunt us. Let's pause. Let's take a breath. When we return, our next file takes us into a world of flickering video static and a mind that could only experience the world through a lens. Tonight, we travel to a place of profound, quiet beauty, a place that, for a time, became the epicenter of a nation's terror. Many of us have seen the film, Memories of Murder, a cinematic masterpiece.
a story of two detectives lost in the rain and the mud, chasing a phantom they can never catch. The film is a brilliant study of obsession, of failure, and of the ambiguity that haunts us. It ends with that famous, shattering final shot. The detective, years later, staring directly into the camera, staring into the void, knowing the man who did it is still out there, watching. It is a perfect piece of fiction, but the truth is always less poetic and far more brutal. The truth is a story of more victims, a story of more chaos, and it has an ending that no screenwriter would dare to write because it is so profoundly, bitterly unsatisfying. It is a story of a monster who was not a cinematic enigma, but a simple, horrifying statistical error, a glitch in the system. Tonight, sleepy detectives, we are going to Hwasong. Hwasong, South Korea, in 1986, was not the bustling, high-tech suburb of Seoul it is today. It was the countryside. It was the seagull, a word that means more than just rural. It means a place of deep tradition, of quiet fields, of a life lived by the rhythms of the seasons. Picture it. Endless golden rice paddies, shimmering in the humid summer air. Narrow, unpaved roads winding between small villages. The only sounds at night were the chirping of crickets and the whisper of wind through the barley. This was a place where time moved slowly, a place where everyone knew their neighbors, where doors were not locked, and where the concept of a stranger, a truly malicious stranger, was the stuff of ghost stories, not real life. The police force in Hwasong reflected this. They were local men dealing with local problems. A stolen bicycle, a drunken dispute at a market. They were not equipped, in technology or in psychology, for what was about to happen. They were guardians of a peaceful, analog world. And into this world, a new kind of predator emerged. He was not a creature of folklore. He was a modern monster. He was methodical. He was repetitive. He was a creature of cold, statistical violence. And he would break this peaceful world and an entire nation for 5 terrifying years. The terror began, as it so often does, on a perfectly normal day. September 15, 1986. A 71-year-old woman, returning home from visiting her daughter, was walking along a path that cut through the rice paddies. She was a grandmother. She was a fixture in her village. She knew every stone on that path. She never made it home. The next morning, her body was found. She was discovered in a drainage ditch, her body partially concealed by the tall grass. The small Hwasong police force was stunned. This was not a robbery. This was not a crime of passion. It was something else. And the first detail of a horrifying signature was already present. She had been bound, not with rope, not with wire, but with her own clothing. The village was horrified, but it was seen as a terrible, isolated anomaly, a tragic, inexplicable event. The calm of the rice paddies returned. For 1 month. On October 20th, another woman, a 25-year-old, walking home from a bus stop, found in a similar way in a similar field. Bound, again with her own garments. This time the officers noted the bindings were more complex, more practiced. The police were no longer just confused, they were afraid. They had no leads, no motives, no suspects. They had only a pattern, and the pattern was escalating. December 12th, a 24-year-old woman vanished from a bus stop. Her body found months later in a field, her own socks and stocking used as a gag and a ligature. December 14th, just 2 days later, a 21-year-old woman near a different bus stop. A creature was now actively hunting in Hwasong. The press began to take notice. The small, quiet farming town was now the center of a terrifying story. The police, overwhelmed, did the only thing they could. They flooded the zone. They brought in detectives from Seoul. They set up roadblocks. They patrolled the narrow farm roads. And the hunter watched them, and he waited. For nearly 5 months, there was silence. The winter was cold, and the town held its breath, hoping the nightmare had passed. Perhaps the man had left. Perhaps he was gone. The spring came. The fields turned green. May 2nd, 1987, a 29-year-old woman. September 7th, 1987, a 52-year-old woman. And now, the signature was complete. The police and the nation began to see the full picture. The predator had rules. His first rule, he hunted on rainy nights. The sound of the rain, the damp earth, the isolation. It was his cover. It muffled the sounds. It washed away the evidence. He became known as the rainstorm hunter. His second rule, he hunted women who were alone, often walking home from a bus stop in the dark along the unlit paths that connected the villages. And his third and most famous rule, he had a preference. The police noted, with a growing sense of dread, that many of his victims had been wearing the color red. This single, terrifying detail was all it took. A wave of primal fear, a modern superstition, swept the nation. Women in Korea stopped wearing red. They burned their red coats, their red scarves, their red dresses. To wear red in Hwasong was to paint a target on your back. The town, once a place of open doors and quiet trust, became a fortress of fear. No woman walked alone. They were escorted to the bus stops by their fathers, their brothers, their husbands. Civilian defense groups, armed with bamboo spears and baseball bats, patrolled the fields at night. The Hwasong police force, and indeed the entire South Korean government, was now facing a national crisis. This was not just a series of crimes. It was a humiliation. And this is where the reality of the case becomes so much more chaotic than the focused, noirish narrative of the film. The investigation was not a careful, scientific procedural. It was an act of pure, brute force desperation. This was the collision of two worlds. A 20th century monster had appeared in a 19th century world. The police had no DNA technology, they had no criminal profiling, they had no centralized database. They had only shoe leather and fear. They launched the largest manhunt in the nation's history. Over 2 million man-hours were poured into this single case. More than 3,000 men were brought in as suspects. 3,000! The investigation became a dragnet of brutality. The police were desperate for an answer, any answer. They arrested any man who looked shifty, any man who was new to town, any man who couldn't provide a perfect alibi, and they interrogated them. These were not polite questions. These were beatings. These were men tortured for days, deprived of sleep, forced to confess to crimes they could not possibly have committed. Several men confessed under duress, only to be released when their stories fell apart, or when the real hunter struck again, proving their innocence. The police were not just failing, they were actively destroying the investigation. The crime scenes, the most sacred part of any modern case, were treated with horrifying incompetence. They were contaminated. Hundreds of officers, reporters, and curious locals would trample through the fields, destroying footprints, fibers, and any hope of finding clean evidence. The killer was not a genius. He was simply operating in a world of chaos, and he was reveling in it. On September 26, 1988, he attacked his 8th victim, and this time it was different. It was the first and only victim he attacked indoors, a 13-year-old girl in her own bedroom. He had slipped into the house, past her sleeping family, and performed his ritual. This act broke the final barrier. He was not just on the paths. He was not just in the fields. He was in their homes.
The nation was hysterical. The government, in a move that feels almost medieval, did something unbelievable. They fired the chief of police, and they brought in shamans. Yes, shamans. Spiritualists were brought to Hwasong to hold ceremonies, to walk the fields, to try and mystically divine the location of the killer. It was the ultimate admission of failure. The forces of logic and modernity had failed. They had been beaten. The only thing left was magic. And the killer just continued. He would attack again and again. A 19-year-old, a 69-year-old. His victims had no connection other than their vulnerability. He was not a creature of passion. He was an equal opportunity predator. He was, as we discussed, a glitch in the system, a random statistical terror. And then, after his 10th confirmed victim on April 3, 1991, he stopped. Just like that. The rain came, but the hunter did not. The women in red were left alone. The fields became quiet again, haunted now not by a predator, but by the ghosts of his victims. The case went cold. But it never, ever went away. The Hwasong murders became a national scar, a wound that refused to heal. It was the great unsolved mystery that defined a generation. Who was the rainstorm hunter? Was he dead? Had he been imprisoned for another crime? Or was he still out there, living a normal life, a quiet neighbor, a father, a husband? This was the question that haunted the detective in that final scene of Memories of Murder. He was staring at the audience because the killer could be anywhere. He could be one of us. For 30 long, agonizing years, that was the ending. A perfect, terrifying, unresolved void. The monster had won. He had held a nation hostage, and then he had simply retired. Until 2019. Technology had finally caught up. The world of 1986, the world of unpaved roads and bamboo spears, was gone. South Korea was now one of the most technologically advanced nations on Earth, and its police force now had the one tool they had dreamed of, a national DNA database. In September 2019, as a matter of routine, the cold case unit for the Hwasong murders decided to retest the few precious pieces of evidence they had preserved from the contaminated scenes. A victim's underwear, a sock. They ran the degraded 30-year-old samples through the new system, and they got a hit. The DNA matched a man who was already in their system, a man who was, and had been for the past 25 years, sitting in a prison in Busan. His name was Lee Chun-jae. The nation was stunned. The ghost had a name. But who was he? Lee Chun-jae was not a criminal mastermind. He was not a phantom. He was just a man who had lived in Hwasong, a man who had been questioned by police back in the 1980s, but had been dismissed. He was one of the 21,000. He had been right there, under their noses, the whole time. So why was he in prison? In 1994, 3 years after the Hwasong attacks had suddenly stopped, Lee Chun-jae had another terrible urge. He had invited his 18-year-old sister-in-law to his home. He had drugged her, assaulted her, and then ended her life. He had been caught for that crime. His DNA was taken, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The Hwasong murders had stopped in 1991 because he had moved, and he had only been free for 3 more years before his compulsions landed him in prison for good. The detectives, now old men, the very men who had been broken by this case, traveled to Busan prison. They sat down opposite a quiet, unassuming 56-year-old man. They showed him the evidence, the DNA match, and Lee Chun-jae smiled. He did not deny it. He did not lie. The game was over. He calmly and with horrifying detail confessed. He confessed to all of it. And he confessed to more. He confessed not just to the 10 murders that the police knew about. He confessed to 4 other murders that they had never solved. He confessed to over 30 assaults and attempted assaults. He was not just a hunter. He was a machine, a creature of pure, relentless appetite. The nation finally had its answer. The book was closed. The monster was identified. And this, sleepy detectives, is the final, bitter twist. The part of the story that is so much more real and so much more cruel than any movie. When Lee Chun-jae was identified, the public cried out for justice. They wanted him tried. They wanted him to pay for the decade of terror, for the 14 lives he had extinguished. But he never will. In 2006, the statute of limitations for the final Hwasong murder had expired. According to South Korean law at the time, a crime, no matter how heinous, could not be prosecuted after 15 years. They had found him, he had confessed, and he was, for those 14 murders, legally untouchable. He would remain in prison, but only for the one crime he had been caught for in 1994. The law, which had failed so spectacularly to catch him, now failed in its final act to even punish him. This is the reality that Memories of Murder could not show you. The film ended on a question mark, a beautiful, haunting piece of ambiguity. The truth is a ledger, a simple, cold, bureaucratic calculation. The detectives got their man. They solved their case, and the system told them it was too late. Lee Chun-jae is still in prison today. He is, by all accounts, a model prisoner. Quiet, polite. He will likely spend the rest of his natural life there. But his name will never appear on a docket for the crimes that made him a legend. The rainstorm hunter of Hwasong was not defeated. He was not brought to justice. He was simply identified. An old file finally closed with a staple and a sigh of profound national exhaustion. A ghost finally given a name, but whose chains could never be fastened. Tonight, we travel to the City of Angels, Los Angeles. But we are not going to the Hollywood Hills or the sun-drenched beaches of Santa Monica. We are going downtown, to a part of the city known as Skid Row. And we are going to a building that has become a legend. A building that seems to act as a magnet for the darkest impulses of the human experience. We are going to the Cecil Hotel. When we think of haunted houses in our fiction, we picture isolated mansions on dark hills, plagued by ancient curses or spectral families. They are places set apart from the world. But the Cecil Hotel is scarier, because it is real. And it is not set apart from the world. It is in the very heart of it. Opened in the 1920s as a grand destination for business travelers, the Cecil's fortunes fell as quickly as the stock market. It devolved, becoming a place of last resort, a transient hotel, a place to disappear. It is a building that has absorbed decades of human misery. This is not a metaphor. The Cecil Hotel has been a temporary home to some of history's most infamous monsters. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived on the 14th floor during his horrific spree, returning to his blood-soaked room unnoticed. Jack Unterweger, the Austrian serial predator, also stayed at the Cecil, paying homage, perhaps, to his predecessor. It is a place of countless unexplained passings, of overdoses, of lives that ended in quiet, desperate anonymity in one of its 700 rooms. The Cecil is not a haunted house in the fictional sense. It is a container, a vast concrete and brick container for real-life tragedy. And in 2013, this container would become the stage for one of the most baffling, viral, and heartbreaking mysteries of the internet age. A mystery that began, as it so often does, with a tourist full of hope. Her name was Elisa Lam. She was 21 years old, a student from Vancouver, Canada. She was bright, ambitious, curious, and on a solo adventure, a West Coast tour, as she called it. She was traveling alone, seeking experience, seeking to find herself. In late January 2013, her journey brought her to Los Angeles. And for reasons of budget, or perhaps just a lack of local knowledge, she checked into the Cecil Hotel. She was given a room on the 5th floor, a shared hostel-style room. For a few days, her trip seemed normal. She called her family every single day, checking in, telling them about her adventures. She was a dutiful, loving daughter. And then, on January 31st, 2013, the calls stopped. Elisa Lam had, for all intents and purposes, vanished. The Los Angeles Police Department was called in. They searched her room. Her belongings were all there. Her laptop, her wallet, her clothes, her medication. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of foul play. She had not checked out. She had simply ceased to be. The police were baffled. They reviewed hours of security footage from the hotel. They saw her in the lobby, in the hallways. She was always alone. They saw her enter an elevator on the night of January 31st. And then, nothing. She was never seen leaving the hotel. For 2 agonizing weeks, her family and the police were left with a perfect, impossible void. A 21-year-old woman had walked into a 14-story building and had evaporated into the air. The case was going nowhere, and in a move of growing desperation, the LAPD decided to release the only real lead they had. It was their last card. It was a piece of security footage, 4 minutes, silent, taken from a single fixed camera inside one of the hotel's elevators. They released this video to the public on February 13th, hoping a local might recognize her, might offer a clue. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. The video was not just a clue. It was a portal. It was perhaps the single most terrifying piece of found footage in history, precisely because it was real. It did not just go viral, it became a global obsession. It was a 4-minute nightmare that millions of people watched and rewatched and analyzed with a terrifying forensic intensity. Let us, sleepy detectives, watch it together. The video is grainy, stamped with a time code in the corner. The doors of the elevator slide open. Elisa Lam, in a red hoodie, steps inside. She looks relaxed, casual. She leans forward and presses a long series of buttons. 1, 2, 3, maybe half a dozen. She then steps back into the corner of the elevator, as one does, and waits. And this is where the ordinary ends. The doors do not close. Elisa waits. 1 second, 2, 3. The doors remain open. She steps forward, leans her head out of the elevator, and peers cautiously into the hallway. She looks to the right. She looks to the left. Her movements are quick, almost bird-like. She steps back inside the elevator, pressing herself against the wall, as if trying to hide from something in the corner. The doors still do not close. She waits again. The tension is unbearable. What is she seeing? What is she hiding from? She darts forward again, this time stepping fully out into the hallway, to the left. She seems to be looking down the corridor. She then steps back in. Then she steps out. Then back in. It is a strange, hesitant, frantic dance. And then she steps just outside the elevator, to the left, just out of frame of the camera, and she begins to gesture. We can only see her arms, her hands. They are moving, twisting, waving.
Her fingers splay, then clench. It is not a dance. It is not a stretch. It looks, to all the world, like she is talking to someone. An argument, a plea, a frantic, silent, and bizarre conversation with a person who is not there.
She is out of view for nearly 30 seconds. Then she reappears, walking away from the elevator down the hallway to the left. She vanishes from sight. And then, the final, horrifying punctuation. The elevator doors, which have remained stubbornly, impossibly open for more than 2.5 minutes, suddenly slide shut. As if whatever was holding them, whatever she was interacting with, has finally let them go. The video shows the doors closing, then opening again, then closing, then opening again, as if the elevator is now, finally, trying to complete the commands she gave it minutes before. The video ends. The world exploded.
This was not a simple missing person video. This was, to the millions of internet detectives who now took up the case, proof of something paranormal. The theories were immediate, and they were terrifying. Theory 1, the ghost. She was interacting with a spirit. The Cecil was haunted, and she had been taken by a demonic entity. The elevator was being held by a ghost. Her hand gestures were her trying to cast a spell or plead with an unseen force. Theory 2, the killer. She was hiding from someone. A predator, perhaps another guest, or even a hotel employee, was standing just out of frame, in the one spot the camera could not see. She was trying to reason with him. He was controlling the elevator, holding the door open button from the outside. He had lured her away. She was a victim of foul play. Theory 3, the elevator game. A bizarre urban legend, popular in Korea, where pressing buttons in a specific sequence in an elevator could transport you to another world. Had she been playing this game? Was this a ritual? This 4-minute clip became a modern ghost story. It was the Blair Witch Project, but it was real. It was a digital curse. And Elisa Lam was no longer a missing person. She was a folk legend, a mystery to be solved by a million strangers on the internet. And while the world was obsessing over the video, while they were analyzing pixels and debating demons, a far more terrestrial horror was unfolding inside the Cecil Hotel. It began on February 14th, the day after the video was released. The guests at the Cecil, the few permanent residents, and the handful of unsuspecting tourists began to complain. First, they complained about the water pressure. It was terrible, a trickle. Then they complained about the taste. The water, they said, had a strange, sweet, almost savory flavor. It was awful. And finally, they complained about the color. When they first turned on the tap in the morning, the water would sputter out, black. A dark, oily, sickening black, for a second or two before it ran clear. For days, guests were told it was just the old pipes. This was the Cecil, after all. What did they expect? They drank it. They brushed their teeth with it. They showered in it. The complaints grew louder, more insistent. The smell was getting worse. The taste was unbearable. On the morning of February 19th, 2013, 19 days after Elisa Lam was last seen, and nearly a week after the complaints began, a hotel maintenance worker named Santiago Lopez was sent to investigate. He took the staff elevator to the 14th floor. He then found the staircase that led to the roof. The door to the roof was supposed to be locked. It was supposed to be alarmed. This was a key point in every internet theory. Elisa could never have gotten to the roof. But the door wasn't locked. The alarm, Lopez would later say, had been turned off for days because it was constantly going off, annoying the guests on the floor below. It was just broken. Lopez stepped out onto the roof. Before him stood the 4 massive cylindrical water tanks that supplied the entire hotel. They were 10 feet tall, made of metal, and sat on a concrete platform. He climbed the ladder attached to the side of the main tank. He noted, with confusion, that the heavy metal hatch on top of the tank was open. It should have been closed. He looked inside. The water was dark and still. And there, floating face up in the murky water, just inches below the surface, was Elisa Lamb. She was naked. Her clothes, the red hoodie, the shorts, were in the tank with her, floating near the bottom, alongside her room key. The internet's ghost story had just found its horrifying, tragic ending. The discovery answered the what, but it only deepened the how. The internet detectives went into overdrive. This was not a suicide. This was not an accident. This was clearly a sinister plot. How could she have gotten to the roof? The door was supposed to be alarmed. How could she have climbed into a 10-foot tank? She was a small woman. And most importantly, how could she have opened the heavy metal lid and then closed it from the inside? The worker had found it open, but the press, in its initial frenzy, had misreported it as closed. The case was now, in the public's mind, a confirmed murder. The LAPD, they claimed, was covering it up. The Cecil Hotel was protecting a killer. The coroner's office began its work. The autopsy was meticulous. They were looking for a killer too. They checked for signs of assault. There were none. No bruises. No scratches. No defensive wounds. They checked for signs of intoxication. They ran a full toxicology report. There were no illegal substances. No alcohol, no date substances. They found what she wasn't taking. The report noted that the levels of her prescribed medication in her system were extremely low or non-existent. And this was the key. Elisa Lamb, as her family knew all too well, was not just a bright, ambitious student. She was a young woman struggling with a profound, severe case of bipolar I disorder, a condition that, when unmedicated, can lead to devastating episodes of mania, and, in its most extreme form, psychosis. This was the truth greater than fiction hook. The part of the story that is so much sadder and so much more unsettling than any ghost. The case of Elisa Lamb was not a murder mystery. It was a mental health tragedy. Let us go back to the elevator video. Let us watch it again, not as a ghost story, but as a medical event. The woman in that video is not hiding from a killer. She is not talking to a ghost. She is in the terrifying, confusing grip of a psychotic episode. Her mind is no longer tethered to reality. The paranoia is overwhelming. She is hiding from people who are not there. She is talking to hallucinations. The frantic hand gestures are not a spell. They are the physical manifestation of a mind that is fractured, trying to make sense of a reality that is no longer making sense. She pressed all those buttons, perhaps to get away, to make the elevator go, and when it didn't, perhaps because the door hold button for the floor was already pressed by someone earlier, her paranoid mind interpreted this not as a mechanical quirk, but as a threat, as proof that something was controlling it. In this state of profound terror and confusion, she did what any cornered animal would do. She fled. She ran. She was not lured to the roof. She fled to the roof. She found the fire escape. She ran up the stairs. She found the alarmed door, which was not alarming. She pushed it open and found herself on the dark, isolated roof. A place to hide, a place of safety. She saw the water tanks, a place to really hide. She climbed the ladder on the side of the tank. She managed to pull open the lid, which was heavy, yes, but not impossibly so. And in her disordered state, seeking the ultimate place of safety, she slipped inside. She got in, and she could not get out. The sides were smooth. The water was cold. She was alone, in the dark, trapped. The coroner's final report was simple and heartbreaking. Accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor. This is the ending that no one wants to accept. It is the truth that is far, far scarier than the fiction. Why? Because a ghost story is, in a strange way, comforting. It means the world has rules. There are demons, yes, but they can be fought. There are killers, yes, but they can be caught. But the reality of Eliza Lamb's passing offers no such comfort. It offers only a cold, terrible void. The monster in this story was not a ghost. It was an invisible, chemical imbalance in a brilliant young woman's brain. The accomplice was not a sinister killer. It was a broken, apathetic, and negligent hotel. A hotel with broken alarms, unlocked roof doors, and unsecured water tanks. A hotel that, for a week, served its guests water from a tomb. The case of Eliza Lamb is not an unsolved mystery. It is a solved tragedy. The internet and the documentaries that followed would prefer the ghost story. They continue to poke holes, to ask questions, to insist on a darker, more cinematic ending. They are haunted by the video. But the real horror is not in the video. The real horror is that a 21-year-old woman, in her moment of most profound need, was failed. She was failed by her own mind, and she was failed by a world that was not built to protect her. She found her way to the one place in that entire, sprawling city from which she could never, ever escape. And that is a truth more heartbreaking and more profoundly terrifying than any story of a haunting at the Cecil Hotel. We are going beneath the soil of a very normal-looking farm in a very normal-looking town to unearth a story that proves, once again, that the truth is always more terrifying than fiction. When we think of the Black Widow in our stories, our popular fiction, what do we picture? We picture a woman of intoxicating charm, a cinematic creature wrapped in shadow and silk, who lures a man in with promises of passion and dispatches him in a moment of heated, intimate betrayal. Her motives are often tangled in jealousy, revenge, or a dark, twisted love. But the truth is always colder, more methodical. The most successful predator in history wasn't a femme fatale. She was an entrepreneur. She didn't sell passion, she sold stability. She didn't promise a wild romance, she promised the American dream. A home, a farm, a family, and a comfortable retirement. And the men who came to her didn't come seeking a lover. They came seeking a partner, a capable wife to build a life with. They came with their entire life savings in their pockets, a show of good faith. And in return, she gave them an ending, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the cold efficiency of a businesswoman liquidating a bad asset. This isn't a story about a broken heart. It's a story about a ledger book, written in red. Tonight, we are traveling to the peaceful, wholesome heartland of LaPorte, Indiana, at the dawn of the 20th century. We are going to the Gunnis Farm. LaPorte, Indiana, around 1905, was the kind of place that felt insulated from the sins of the big city. Chicago was a noisy, chaotic giant 60 miles away, but LaPorte was a town of quiet streets, white picket fences, and hard-working, God-fearing people. It was a community of Norwegian and Scandinavian immigrants, people who understood the value of a hard day's work, of tilling the land, and of building something that would last. It was a place where neighbors helped neighbors, where doors were often unlocked, and where the greatest anxieties revolved around the harvest or the church bake sale. And on the outskirts of this idyllic town sat the Gunnis Farm. To any passerby, it was a picture of prosperity. A large, two-story white farmhouse, a sturdy red barn, and acres of rich, dark soil. It was run by a woman who seemed to be the very embodiment of the immigrant success story. Her name was Belle Gunness. Belle was a fixture in the community, and a formidable one at that. She was not a small or delicate woman. She was a gigantus, standing nearly 6 feet tall and weighing well over 200 pounds.
She was Norwegian, with a square jaw, plain features, and a strength that few men could match. She was often seen in town, driving her own wagon, her voice carrying a heavy Scandinavian accent. She was known as a hard-working, capable widow. A bit reclusive, perhaps, but that was understandable. She had known so much tragedy. She had lost her first husband, Mad Sorensen, in Chicago, a man who had supposedly perished from an enlarged heart, leaving her with a tidy insurance settlement. Then she had lost her second husband, Peter Gunness, right here in LaPorte. A terrible freak accident, the town believed. A heavy sausage-grinding machine had, according to Belle, inexplicably fallen from a high shelf and struck him, ending his life. Another tragedy, another insurance payout. But Belle, ever the survivor, endured. She ran the farm with an iron will. She was a dedicated mother to her adopted children, Myrtle, Lucy, and little Philip. She was, by all accounts, a savvy businesswoman, a pillar of the community, a woman who had taken her grief and built an empire. And then, in the pre-dawn hours of April 28, 1908, that empire turned to smoke. The first person to see the flames was a hired hand, Joe Maxon. He awoke in his small room on the second floor, choked by the smell of kerosene and smoke. The heat was immense. He scrambled to his window, yelling for Belle and the children. He heard no reply. The house was an inferno, the roar of the fire swallowing all other sound. He leapt from the second-story window, landing hard, breaking no bones but shaken to his core. He ran to the barn to get help, but it was too late. The flames lit up the night sky over LaPorte. The entire town rallied, a frantic scramble of wagons and volunteer firemen. But the farmhouse was a tinderbox. By the time they arrived, the structure was collapsing in on itself. The white farmhouse, that symbol of prosperity, was reduced to a smoking, skeletal ruin by sunrise. The town grieved. As the ashes cooled, the community gathered, their faces grim. They began the heartbreaking work of sifting through the rubble. In the cellar, beneath the charred tangle of bed springs and a fallen piano, they found what they were dreading. 4 bodies. Or rather, 4 charred masses that were barely recognizable as human. 3 were small, clearly the children, Myrtle, Lucy, and Philip. The 4th was an adult, lying beside them. It was a woman. But something was terribly wrong. The 4th body, the one they all assumed was the formidable Belle Gunness, was missing its head. The sheriff, Alva H. Smutzer, was faced with a grim puzzle. A local physician performed a hasty examination and declared that the woman had perished not from the fire, but from a massive dose of strychnine. The working theory quickly solidified. This was a murder-suicide. Belle, overwhelmed by some unknown despair, had poisoned her children and herself, and then, in a final act, had somehow set the fire which had consumed her. The missing head was a gruesome, but not impossible, result of the intense blaze. The town of LaPorte prepared to bury its dead and close this tragic chapter. The case, it seemed, was over. But the story had not truly begun. Because Belle Gunness was not just a farmer. She was, as we discussed, an entrepreneur. And she had recently been in correspondence with a new client. His name was Andrew Helgelian, and his brother, Azel, was on his way. Azel Helgelian arrived in LaPorte from South Dakota with a terrible premonition in his gut. He was not a detective. He was a simple farmer. But he knew his brother, and he knew that his brother was not the kind of man to disappear.
Andrew Helgelian had been a quiet, hard-working farmer. A bachelor, he had amassed a small fortune, and in his loneliness had turned to the newspapers. He had found an advertisement. It was from a charming, wealthy Norwegian widow in LaPorte, Indiana, a woman named Belle Gunnis. She was looking for a partner, a good Norwegian man to share her life and her prosperous farm. Andrew and Belle had exchanged letters. He was captivated. She was everything he was looking for. She was strong, she was successful, she was of good Norwegian stock. In his last letter to his brother, Andrew explained that Belle had one small request. As a show of his sincerity, she asked him to sell his farm, liquidate his assets, and bring his life savings with him to LaPorte. Then they would be married. Andrew Helgelian had sold his farm. He had withdrawn nearly $3,000, a king's ransom in 1908, from his local bank. He had told his brother he was going to LaPorte to marry Belle Gunnis, and then he had vanished. Asle Helgelian stood before Sheriff Smutzer and told him this story. He looked at the charred ruins of the farmhouse, he looked at the reports of the headless body, and he said, with a certainty that chilled the sheriff to the bone, "That is not Belle Gunnis in that cellar. My brother is missing, and she is responsible." Asle's accusations were not the only ones. The community's attention began to turn to a man named Ray Lamfair. Lamfair was a local man, a carpenter who had worked as a hired hand for Belle. He was rough, uneducated, and, by all accounts, hopelessly infatuated with her. He had been her confidant, her handyman, and, many whispered, her lover. But recently, their relationship had soured. Belle had fired him. She had accused him of being unstable, of threatening her. She had even had him arrested for trespassing. On the night of the fire, several witnesses claimed to have seen Lamfair running from the farm. When questioned, Lamfair was erratic. He denied everything. But in his anger at being spurned and accused, he began to drop hints. He laughed at the idea that Belle was gone. "She's not in that cellar," he snarled at deputies. "She's gotten away, just like she always planned." He talked of dark secrets. He hinted that the sheriff should stop sifting the ashes of the house and start digging. "Dig in the hog pen," he said. "Dig in the trash pits." The town was now a hive of rumor and suspicion. Was Lamfair a jealous lover who had set the fire? Or was he telling an impossible truth? Sheriff Smutzer was now squeezed between two powerful forces: the grieving community that wanted to bury their dead, and the iron-willed Norwegian farmer from South Dakota who refused to let them. Asle Helgelian was relentless. He hired his own men. He declared he would dig up the entire farm himself if the law would not. Finally, bowing to the pressure, the sheriff agreed. On May 3, 1908, he assembled a team of men. They were not detectives. They were local farmers and laborers, armed with shovels. They left the ashes of the house and walked, with a sense of grim purpose, toward the soft, disturbed earth of the hog pen and the trash pits. They thought they were looking for one man, Andrew Helgelian. They were not prepared for what they would find. Fiction, in its attempt to shock us, often relies on the theatrical. The monster in a movie creates a grand artistic display. A haunted house has a single dark secret, a body buried beneath the floorboards. But the reality of the Gunnis farm was not theatrical. It was agricultural. It was industrial. It was a problem of volume, of disposal, of processing. The digging began in a patch of soft, sunken earth near the hog pen that Belle had designated as a trash pit. The men plunged their shovels into the damp, dark soil. It took only a few minutes. The first shovel struck something solid, something wrapped in burlap. They cleared the earth away and pulled the heavy, damp bundle to the surface. They cut the twine. Inside was not Andrew Helgelian. It was the body of a young woman. Her name, they would soon learn, was Jenny Olson, Belle's foster daughter. The town was stunned. Jenny had, according to Belle, gone away to a Lutheran college in Los Angeles months before. But here she was, buried in a trash pit, just yards from the family home. And they had just started. The men, now gripped by a cold, frantic energy, moved to the next soft patch of ground, and the next. The hog pen was not just a hog pen. The trash pits were not for trash. The entire property was a loose, unmarked graveyard. What they unearthed was a nightmare of logistics. This was not the work of a single passionate outburst. This was the work of years.
They found another bundle, and another, and another. They found torsos without limbs. They found limbs without torsos. They found skulls. They found clusters of bones so densely packed it was impossible to tell where one person ended and the next began. The ground itself seemed poisoned. It was saturated with quicklime and chemicals, a deliberate, scientific effort to accelerate decomposition, to make the earth swallow its secrets faster. This was not a burial. This was waste management. The horror mounted with every shovelful. They found Andrew Helgelian. His body was there, just as his brother had feared. But he was not alone. They found Ole Budsberg, a man from Wisconsin. He had come to marry Belle, bringing his life savings. He had vanished. They found Thomas Lindboe from Chicago. He too had come to marry Belle. He too had vanished. They found men from New York, from Minnesota, from across the entire Midwest. They found the remains of at least 10 men, and perhaps more. The ground was so compromised, a true count was impossible. And it was not just the remains, it was the artifacts. With the bodies, they found the mundane, heartbreaking remnants of their former lives. They found dozens of watches, the hands frozen at different times. They found piles of buttons, coats, and shoes. They found stacks of empty travel trunks, discarded after their owners had been processed. The LaPorte Sheriff's Office, a small-town operation designed to handle drunkards and horse thieves, was now standing in the middle of one of the most prolific slaughterhouses in American history. The hog pen, the local farmers realized with a sickening lurch, had been very well fed. The why was no longer a mystery. The why was sitting in stacks on the sheriff's desk. While the men were digging, detectives had finally forced open a locked trunk in the post office, one that Ozzel Helgelian had insisted they seize. Inside, they found the ledger book to Belle's business. It was a stack of letters, hundreds of them. This was the truth-greater-than-fiction hook. Belle's monstrosity was not in her passion. It was in her paperwork. She was a meticulous administrator. The letters were all in response to the same advertisement, which she had placed in Norwegian-language newspapers across the country. Wanted, a woman who owns a beautifully located and valuable farm in one of the finest districts in LaPorte County, Indiana, desires to secure a partner, a good and reliable man. Object, matrimony. As a show of good faith, he must be able to invest a sum of his own. The letters were heartbreaking. They were from lonely, hard-working, decent men. Farmers, widowers, laborers. All of them had saved their money. All of them were looking for a home, for a kind partner to see out their final years. And all of them saw Belle Gunnis as the answer to their prayers. Her business model was now chillingly clear. Step 1, the lure. She would target these men, men with no close family, men whose disappearance would not be immediately noticed. Step 2, the isolation. She would convince them to travel to her farm. They would arrive, hopeful, with their life savings in cash. Step 3, the transaction. She would be seen in town with them once or twice, perhaps at the bank, as they deposited their money into her account. She would explain to her neighbors that this was a cousin or a friend from the old country, just visiting. Step 4. The liquidation. Then the man would go away on business or return to Norway. In reality, in the quiet of the night, Belle would serve her guest a final, hearty meal, often laced with poison. Once the man was indisposed, her immense physical strength would do the rest. Step 5. The processing. The body would be moved under cover of darkness to the basement. There, with a set of tools, she would undertake the grim, methodical work of reducing a human being to disposable parts. Step 6. The disposal. The parts would be buried in the quicklime pits or fed to the hogs. The man and his money would be swallowed by the farm. This was her business for years. She wasn't just a farmer, she was a processor. She was harvesting men. Her entire history was reread in this horrifying new light. The enlarged heart of her first husband, the sausage grinder accident of her second, all of them, almost certainly, were early, less refined versions of her business. They were test runs, prototypes for the efficient factory she would perfect in LaPorte. She wasn't a black widow driven by a twisted love. She was a predator driven by simple, cold, American greed. She was an entrepreneur who had found a grotesque market inefficiency, lonely men with money. And that brought the detectives back to the smoking ruin of the farmhouse, back to the one final, agonizing question. The headless body in the cellar, was it Belle? The town, the state, the entire country now needed to know. Had this monster perished in the flames, or had the most successful businesswoman in LaPorte pulled off one last brilliant transaction? This is the final haunting chapter, the part of the story that fiction would never allow. Fiction demands justice. It demands a third act where the monster is confronted, unmasked, and vanquished. But the case of Belle Gunness offers no such comfort. It offers only a cold, unresolved, and terrifying possibility. First, there was the dental evidence. As the digging continued, a piece of dental bridgework was found in the ashes of the cellar near the headless body. It was a unique piece containing porcelain teeth and gold fillings. The town dentist was called in. He examined the bridgework. He then compared it to the extensive dental records he had for Belle Gunness. His conclusion was immediate and certain. The bridgework did not belong to Belle. Second, there were the measurements. The headless torso was analyzed by physicians. They measured its height, its bone density, its approximate weight. The torso belonged to a woman who was roughly 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed no more than 150 pounds. Belle Gunness was a giantess. She was nearly 6 feet tall and weighed, by all conservative estimates, over 200 pounds. The body in the cellar was not her. Third, there was the money. In the days leading up to the fire, investigators discovered that Belle Gunness had made a series of large withdrawals. She had systematically emptied her bank accounts, converting her entire fortune into cash. A woman preparing for a murder-suicide does not liquidate her assets. A woman planning an escape, however, does. The entire event, the police realized with a sickening chill, had been staged. This was not a tragedy. It was a performance. It was Belle's masterpiece. She had sensed the net was closing. Asle Helgelian was writing insistent letters. Ray Lamphere, her spurned lover, was becoming a liability. She knew her time was up. So she executed her final business plan, her exit strategy. She likely lured one final victim to the farm, a new housekeeper perhaps, a woman of small stature with no family, whose disappearance would go unnoticed. She had poisoned her own children. She had poisoned this unfortunate decoy. She had placed them in the cellar, dressed the woman in her own clothes, and cut off the head to obscure the identity. She had poured the kerosene, lit the match, and walked away. She had sacrificed her children, her farm, and a stranger, all to create a smokescreen. As the town of LaPorte was grieving its lost widow, Belle Gunness, with a satchel full of cash, was likely sitting on a train, watching the Indiana farmland roll by, already planning her next venture. What about Ray Lamphere, the jealous lover? He was arrested. He was charged with the whole thing, but the jury couldn't make sense of it. They acquitted him of all the serious charges. They found him guilty only of arson. He was sent to prison where he perished a year later. But before he did, he gave a final confession. He told the prison chaplain the entire story. He admitted he had helped Belle for years. He had buried bodies. He had run errands. He had been her devoted, terrified servant. And he confirmed the ultimate fear, that he had helped her stage the fire, and that she had escaped, promising to send for him. She never did. The story of Belle Gunness ends there. It does not end with a confrontation. It does not end with justice. It ends with a question mark. For decades, sightings of Belle were reported across the country. A large, stern Norwegian woman in Los Angeles. A wealthy, reclusive landowner in Mississippi. She was everywhere, and she was nowhere. She had dissolved into the American landscape, a ghost with a bag full of money. We are left with the chilling, unresolved reality. The fictional Black Widow is almost always caught. Her passion is her downfall. But Belle Gunness was not a creature of passion. She was a creature of pure, cold, industrial logic. She built a factory for processing human beings. She ran it for years, earning a massive profit. And when the business climate changed, she did what any smart CEO would do. She cashed out, dissolved her assets, burned the headquarters to the ground, and disappeared. The farm in LaPorte is quiet now. The ground has long since settled. But the story remains, a testament to a terrifying truth. That the most monstrous acts in history are not born from madness or cinematic evil. They are born from something far more common and far more cold. The simple, methodical pursuit of profit. Good night, sleepy detectives.